Hey everybody, welcome to one more round. Today, I've got Josh Hauskins with me, and me and some friends call him Joa. And you know what? We've been friends for several years now.
Right.
What was really cool was Josh. Josh was by far the youngest person in our group that we were in. You're 26 now.
Just turned 27.
27.
recently.
Okay,
Yeah.
so at the time you would have probably been 23, 24 years old. And what was cool is just learning a little bit about your story, getting to know your dad, and how much further you thought than most people that are even my age in their 40s and stuff. And then we had reconnected last week. Not that we haven't talked in a while, but we had lunch last week. You told me about a new project you're in. We talked about you selling your first company at 25 years old or whatever it was, and that whole roller coaster. And I love what you're doing now, but I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that. I thought this would be a fun experience. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, man. Feel welcome. And yeah, I mean, I appreciate all of that, all the kind sentiment towards that too. I think, a big part of why I think what you're calling forward thinking, it has been a big part of kind of my journey and my story, even from when I was at a relatively young age. Has been to me, I think a lot of people have a certain kind of way that they, at least in this life, kind of want to be seen, kind of their own brand, so to speak. Not, the word personal brand is kind of a trendy term now that's usually used in a much more specific context.
Sure.
But I mean, the true personal brand of who do you want to come across as to people around you, at least in this life, right? And I think for a lot of people, it can be different things. It can be, I want to be this big business guy, or I want to be someone who's popular everywhere I go, or I want to be, I want to be known as a good husband or father. And those are all awesome things, and I think obviously those things can change over the course of your life. But for me, what it was, and maybe some psychologists can answer why this was, maybe because of the way I grew up or something. But for me, I always wanted to be kind of known by people as someone who was able to transform himself. I wanted to be known as someone who was able to, anything that I wanted to do, I could kind of become whoever or whatever I needed to be in that context to make it happen. And that was just always something that made me passionate. It was the one thing that really put that drive in me for a long time. And I think that's part of why that kind of almost forced me to be a forward thinker.
Yeah.
In a lot of different ways. But yeah, I'm happy to go into some of the specifics of what that looked like with the company, and also kind of how that looked in other areas of my life too. That'd be great.
Yeah, and we'll start with that because most people that are watching this, because it's my audience, they probably don't know you yet.
Yep.
And when you were telling me, I think we were having lunch at Opalife, the first time we kind of officially met about this. Now, again, we'd been on a retreat together and become friends, but you were telling me specifically about the job board that you created for the construction world.
Yep.
You're already I want to say at that point maybe a year and a half, 2 years into it, and it was taking traction, and you're like, yeah, I don't even know that you knew that it was going to take traction like it did. And then you ran with it, and you were able to get it to a point where you did sell that.
Yep.
What number one, what gave you the idea to even start something like that? What were you doing?
Yep.
And was that a side hustle? And if it was, how did you get it from there to what you pivoted into?
Sure. So the way that the idea for it kind of originated, and the name of it was, it's very straightforward. It was called Skilled Trade Jobs. That was kind of and it was honestly, I wish it was some cool origin story. It was really just the best domain I could find online.
Keep it simple.
That's what it blossomed into. But I think it also ties into this kind of interesting, thought process in the current kind of zeitgeist of business and entrepreneurship right now, which is this weird separation or now lack thereof between are you an entrepreneur, or are you the guy who's working in an office and you're doing the traditional thing? And I think that used to be two very clear-cut things, and those are starting to actually kind of be more malleable and blend into each other. And this I think is a cool example of that, because in my career was in tech sales. My first job ever that I kind of networked into when I was younger was for a company many people have heard of called ZipRecruiter. And what I specifically did there was recruitment marketing with back-end partnerships. So that was basically getting in touch with websites that were getting a lot of traffic. I won't get too into the nerdy details of it, but it was basically getting in touch with publishers, making sure that their like job data was like getting onto their site so they could get more traffic to their job listings for like the employers that were posting jobs, right? And through that work, I was eventually laid off from ZipRecruiter from COVID, but the stuff that I learned there was hyper specialized in that world of like, okay, how does traffic between job listings on websites and the way that they feed into other places, like how does that whole marketplace and ecosystem work? And something that I always had an entrepreneurship itch, and one of the things that I know about successful businesses, especially if you're bootstrapping something, is usually, like, nothing's a blanket rule, but usually the more niche, the better. Like the more specialized, the more likely you are to build traction. Yeah. So, and I had a specialized skill set from that. So I'm like, okay, I have one piece of the formula down, right? But I was still kind of a junior. Like by the time I was laid off, I was about 20, I think, maybe 21. And then I eventually, through my career, wound up in a role at another startup called Transfer, and they did job trainings in the construction space, as well as other trades like manufacturing and like automotive and stuff. And what I learned specifically in that world was the general kind of journey and also the state of the market when it came to those types of jobs, like the labor shortages, the way that companies handle hiring for those kinds of roles, the way that a lot of different like incentives are in place in different states for how those businesses hire because of both of those things. Again, very specialized, like something that not a whole lot of people know. And then when it came time to start thinking in my head about, okay, I have a career that's seemingly healthy, but also my career is also in tech startups, which are traditionally very volatile. So I'm like, okay, what's something that I can do to kind of supplement my life and kind of add, another source of income or just something else that I can really have as part of my foundation. And I thought, well, okay, I have these two highly specialized skill sets. And I think this is where a lot of people who want to get started in entrepreneurship, especially like younger people, like this is the way they should be probably thinking. Is like, okay, what do you kind of already have an unfair advantage at? Because everyone has something. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, everyone has something that they have some sort of unfair advantage. Whether it's because of the life you've lived, whether it's because of the jobs that you've had, whether it's the relationships you have. Like, there's something that you have if you search deeply and hard enough. And what I had was, well, okay, I had this job experience in this like recruitment marketplace in like digital publishers and traffic and stuff. And then I also had this background in like how trade jobs work. And I was like, okay, like what does it look like to combine those two skill sets into something that's even more specialized that there is still demand for?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, my expertise from ZipRecruiter, like I know how to build a website that's a job board essentially, and I know how to like make the right foundational partnerships happen to make a sustainable just platform. And I also had the industry knowledge from the trades, especially in construction, but in other areas as well, where I was like, okay, well, I know how to get in touch with the right people. I know how to speak the right language. I know how to market in the right way to the right audience. And it ended up being, it took some time to get some traction, but it ended up being a winning formula. And I learned a lot of really interesting things there too. Stuff that I never would have expected. Things like most of my customer base actually came from organic. It didn't come from paid marketing, which to me was incredible, especially on the social side. I never would have expected hiring managers for like U.S. Steel would be buying job postings based off of like an organic Instagram post. I was like, that's insane. But little things like that where, it eventually got to the point where, it went from being a bootstrap thing into cash flow positivity into something that was enough of an asset for me that I was able to kind of use it as a launch pad into other things as well, and then that eventually led to an exit, right? So, that was kind of the story, Yeah,
and it's a really cool concept, and I don't think I told you this when we were having lunch, but he's on my previous life, and I owned a digital agency, and at that time, I think we were talking, I maybe just exited that sale, and I was with the company that bought us, but we had built actually a job board company for somebody who paid us, and I won't mention the name, and they paid us a lot of money. At this point, I mean, they had paid us hundreds of thousands of dollars in development, and we built exactly what they wanted, and they never really made it. And the reason they never really made it, they never niched down. To your point, right? When you can really niche down to something that is going to have a focus, then you can focus your marketing. Because they never did that, like they were spraying all over the board. They were trying, okay, let's try, attorneys, let's try, doctors, let's try. They had in the home service world, they had this and that, but their marketing dollars were spread all over, and it was just this like giant hub rather than something super specialized. And I think that's a huge point as to why, like yours, just you building it is to where we as a team built something that these guys, and both these guys were actually multimillionaires and had done super successful in the corporate world, but they didn't have the same success you had in building something like that because, again, you specialized, you created that niche. Now, let's talk about, you get it to that point and somebody starts looking at your business and they're like, oh, well, would you be interested in selling or exiting your company or doing that? I mean, was that the goal in the beginning? Had you thought about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It was absolutely something that I had as an open possibility. And I think always something that you want to kind of have in mind, especially if I think every entrepreneur who's had a modicum of success kind of knows this, but I think it's something that is really useful for someone starting out is like, know deep down if what you're building is an actual business or if it's just another job. Or if it's, and like everyone talks about, like, especially like, I think this was really part of the social media zeitgeist again at one point. I don't know if it still is, but the idea of like being your own boss, right? It's like, I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to get my own Benz. I'm not going to pay for my boss's Benz, stuff like that. And I mean, there's a modicum of truth to that. I think, like there's definitely a lot of freedom in being an entrepreneur, but depending on what you're doing, like a lot of times, like you're not your own boss. Your boss just becomes your customers. Like now your customer, like you still have a boss. It's just your customers are your boss.
I can 100% tell you that is the truth.
And for me, what it was for me is, when I was building this business, around the time that I started having conversations about selling it and having that exit, was okay. Well, I'm hitting a point where, because again, it was me and like a small group of like contractors that I was hiring on sometimes a one-off basis to make certain things operationally happen. But I was at a point where like, okay, if I'm hitting sort of this kind of ceiling where if I want to bust through it, I'm going to need to get some kind of private equity maybe involved. I'll have to get some kind of investor involved. I'll have to make some larger move and have strings attached essentially. And I was like, well, I could do that, right? And it could likely be successful, but I was at the point where I was like, okay, well, I don't know if that's really what I want for myself, right? I feel like that's a conversation that every entrepreneur should have with themselves so they don't get boxed into something that they regret later on. I met many who have that's unfortunately happened to in one way or another. And I was like, okay, you know what? I think what would make more sense is having conversations about, how I can exit out of this, how I can sell it. And and that whole process was really interesting. I ended up selling it to a company that was doing similar work in terms of job training. And they were working on ways to basically go from a job training space to a job placement space. And my platform was already like a really nice fit for what they were doing. So it made sense to have that act as for them to acquire that portion of the market and that kind of business. So it was just, in a way, it was serendipity. I think a lot of things in business are, where it's like, okay, well, things are going in a certain direction, there's a certain flow, let's go along with it. And sometimes you have to force things to happen, but I was lucky for that to be something that was more serendipitous. So that happened, and that was a lot of lessons learned through that process, a lot of lessons learned through that. That was, when was that? That was back in 2023, I think that happened, like halfway through 2023. And then, since then I've been touching on a lot of different things. I'm still, at this point, I'm back to being W-2'd, but I also have a business that I'm working on now that has been derived from a lot of the things I learned through that process, and it's picking up steam and getting its own legs and having some success of its own. So it's crazy. So many things that I could say about what I've learned through that whole process. But
I think that's like the true entrepreneur, and I've said this many times. I kind of hate the word only because it's been bastardized over the last 20 years. But a true entrepreneur to me is someone that sees a need in the world that isn't there or isn't being fulfilled correctly, and then figures out a way to solve it, and then builds a company by solving that problem. And then usually once they've solved that problem, they have to solve another problem. Like, that's the entrepreneurial spirit. Like, you don't really just, okay, bam, I've exited. I was just listening to an interview with Mark Zuckerberg. He was on Theo Von, which is pretty interesting because Mark Zuckerberg is a fascinating guy. We all know this. Created Facebook, head of Meta. Many people have watched the movie, which is like a little small portion of it, but he's into jiu-jitsu. He's talking about all these things. But he was specifically telling a story where his wife, after he had kind of exited Facebook to a degree and sold some of his stock, and he had built all this, and she's like, "Are you gonna sit down? Are you gonna relax? You're gonna, you should." I mean, he says, "Well, no, I can't. Like, I need to build stuff." So he's always building these things. And he built a sculpture of. He tells a story about building a sculpture of her that is now in their front lawn, and she hates it because who wants a sculpture of herself? But he's like, so he is. Then they had their first kid. Their kid now they have multiple kids, and they're like 3 and 4. One of them though is the same way, always building. Like, he can't just sit still. He has to be doing something. And she looked at him and she says, "I get you now. This is just who you are." It's like, yes, he's got to be doing something, and that's the true entrepreneurial spirit that I see. That people that call themselves that, most of them are not even close to that. They want to be their own boss, right? They just, and you know what, being your own boss is, I will tell you, one of the things I've heard, Tom Ellsworth, who works for Patrick Bet-David, he's actually, I believe, his COO and has helped with all of his different companies and stuff, says, "I'm a much better number 2. I said I've made millions and millions of more as a number 2 than I ever did as number 1, and I know that." So he likes being a number 2. He likes being an employee. And granted, he's got ownership and those kind of things. So it's understanding that spirit. I didn't mean to sidetrack us on that,
of course.
But I have to say that because what you're talking about is that true entrepreneurial spirit. Now it's like you're solving another problem. To talk about that problem, tell me a little bit about the new company, what you guys are doing, because you're in this beginning phase, but just like your other one, it's starting to take pretty quick traction because you've identified a need.
Yeah, I think, and it's also interesting when you get deeper into that topic of entrepreneurship and addressing needs and finding solutions to problems. Like, there's so many different categories of problems, right? There's like micro problems, which was kind of more my last business. It was like, okay, well, there's a skilled labor shortage in these specific industries, like construction, especially, also like manufacturing and generally hard labor, like blue collar type jobs. And also in like specialized work too, like manufacturing, like semiconductors and stuff like that. Highly niched problem. But then there's also problems that are a little bit more broad that kind of permeate slightly into a bunch of different things. And then even though it's a specific problem, it kind of has a wider base. And that's kind of the approach I'm taking with what I'm doing now. So one of the things that I learned, and I briefly mentioned earlier about the growth of the skilled trades job board, is that a lot of my success that I was able to get from, they kind of made me a valid competitor against like the big boys, right? Because like my competitors there were like Indeed. There's some giants out there. This is part of what, when you said you were helping that other company through your agency with that job board, that's part of that issue. It's like if you're trying to be broad in general, like you're competing with people who have like mastered the game decades ago. I found success by niching in that area, but I also found success in niching in my marketing too, because I was, again, like, this was one of my big surprises was, wow, like, I'm getting people buying, $300 to $800 job postings because they saw like a Facebook post they liked, or they saw an Instagram post they liked, or there was some kind of messaging that I had in some kind of like newsletter copy that they liked. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And the more research I did, and I also really love, this might seem unrelated, but it's going to tie in. Something I also really love is networking with other like highly successful people. I think that's part of like kind of why you started this podcast, is like, it's a way to connect with people who have inspiring stories and have like really cool insights. And something I've learned from a lot of what I've done in that area too, combined with some of the things I learned from my job board business, is I think the future of not just business, but I think a lot of other types of just general ways of giving value and the way that we interact and just kind of even transact in different ways with each other is going to be social. Especially with the rise of automation and AI and all these different things, like the personal brand is going to be like not an if, it's going to be a must for anyone. I think when we enter an age where pretty much anything technical can, and who knows how quickly or rapidly this can happen, but like many things that are technical or many things that are like hard skills, we can say, are going to be replaced by automation in one way or another. What's going to be the new commodity is going to be like the soft skills. It's going to be this. It's going to be like the personal. It's going to
have a conversation. Do you have a personality? Do you have stories to tell? Do people like being around you? What's your likability?
Exactly. It's the soul, right? And what I thought of with this business is like, well, okay. And also I just have a love for media. That's always been like, as a result of all the different things I've done, that's kind of been like my first love in a way. It was like media. I thought, okay, well, if personal brands are going to be the future, if that's going to be like the must, probably, I'm thinking ahead here, maybe like 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, there's going to be this revolution of like pretty much every business is going to also have to be a publisher. Like pretty much every business is going to have to be not just a publisher, but like basically a blogger in a way, to put it like reductively. I was like, okay, what about if there was some kind of, and this again is kind of a reductive way of putting it, but what if there was kind of a label or like a record label or even an agency could call it for personal brands that was also niched in a specific area that I'm passionate about, so it could be something that makes sense. So I have a brand that I founded with a co-founder of mine who was on a similar thought track to that. It's called Legendary Life Media. And it started out as a way for me and some people that I knew that were in my network who I knew had strong personal, capability and opportunity and potential for a personal brand. And maybe they were doing some stuff already, but they didn't quite have like the secret sauce or the silver bullet that they were looking for to get traction on it. And I was like, okay, what if I was able to kind of create sort of a media platform for people to get on and actually have that function as a way for them to move forward, right? And that's the idea that it started as, and it's really blossomed into something that is gaining a lot of traction. We're getting a lot of partnerships now. I think a lot of other people are seeing that idea and that potential of it. And it's been something that, for how young it is, it's coming up on just a year we've been operating now. We've already been able to do some really interesting stuff, and that on its own is also a bootstrap. Like that's something that we've done with very little to no investment. Like all the capital going into it's just from our own pocket. But it's been a really interesting process, a lot of lessons learned through that already. And to me, ultimately, that's kind of, I think, one of the signs that you're on the right track as an entrepreneur. It's like, how much can you really say that you're learning from what you're doing? I think if you're able to, with every step forward that you make in your business endeavor, if you're able to, regardless of what the outer results seem to be, if you're able to tie everything that you're doing back to some kind of lesson that you're like logging in your mind, if you're like, okay, I did this, and like here are like the 1 or 2 or 3 lessons that I got out of it. Like here's here's like the hypothesis I had about business or whatever that I'm validating through this. Like, what did this validate that I, or invalidate that like I thought previously?
Yeah.
And as long as you're making that inner, I guess, evolution, and to me, that's a sign that you're on the right track, because I've also had plenty of ideas that have failed, right?
Oh, for sure.
I've had plenty of ideas that have failed, but like in a way they weren't failures, because the things that I learned from those, I can tie back to things that I implemented in the things that I did that were successes, right? So yeah, but that's what I'm currently doing now, and it's been pretty cool, gotta say. Some of the things that have happened.
That's awesome. I mean, you showed me a glimpse of it last week when we were together. I've seen it. I've looked at it a couple times this week, and it's really cool, like just the foundation of it, of what it's doing. But you talk about learning, and I think this is something that we both have a passion for. And I think that's one of the reasons that we connected as much as we did, being, whatever, 15 years apart in age, and really no other. I mean, we're both Christians. We we both went to church, right? So there's that. But I've got a wife, got 19 years, 3 kids. You could probably run circles around me on a basketball court these days. Maybe not. But
who knows?
It was more, you're always learning. We were talking about last week. You said you went to Barnes & Noble and you would sit there and you'd pick up 2 or 3 books, and you just kind of skim through it and take some nuggets.
Yep.
And when you told me that, I'm like, that's exactly what I did when I was 19 years old. My first business venture was in Amway, of all things, a multi-level marketing. But it taught me a hunger for knowledge. And back when I couldn't purchase all my own books or CDs and all that stuff, but books specifically, I would go into Barnes & Noble. I would spend hours there. I would spend 2-3 hours there, and I'd sit on their comfy little chairs, and I would read through some books, and I would put it back on the shelf. And I also, in that world, it's all about meeting new people, and it's the greatest place to meet new people. Because you go into the business section, they're looking at a bit. Oh, have you read that book? Of course, I haven't read it. They're looking at it potentially to buy. But that was always my question. Oh no, I haven't, but I've read this. And then you start up a conversation. Oh, you're a pretty sharp person. Are you looking for ways to make extra money? That was another reason I was there, which it's a whole nother topic for another day. But I've always wanted to learn. I've always wanted to take the lessons from my personal life, but I've always wanted to take lessons from other people's lives that they've learned, and then try to apply that, like you're saying, the hypothesis. Okay, well, this is what I learned from Richard Branson's book, and I hear this, screw it, let's do it. Okay, well, that's his principle, and this is what it breaks down to. I'm going to apply that to this part of my life and see what kind of mess I can create, and then learn from that. And there's just that thing that you just don't know all the answers. And I think the second you think you do is where trouble comes. So for you, where did that learning start? I mean, did you go to college? Did you, were you really good in school?
So yes and no. My when it comes to my academic career, it's actually a pretty just funny story, because I was actually homeschooled growing up, which I think comes with its pluses and minuses, because I was homeschooled in a very traditional way. Like when I hear about like kids being homeschooled now and they have like online classes, I laugh. I'm like, online, like Primavera, what's that? I had books laid out, and I would my day was I sat down at my kitchen table and I read books. It was not completely self-directed, but that was the way I learned, right? Which again has its pluses and minuses. I'm not going to say everything about it was great, but it did, I think, give me from a young age, tying into the entrepreneurial spirit. I think it just instilled in me a reliance on myself to for what I was learning, and for to me it's all on me. I'm not relying on anything outside of me completely to determine my growth in terms of my knowledge and the lessons I'm learning, which made me eventually a pretty in terms of performance, a successful student. I mean, I went to college early. I started being a full-time college student when I was well, actually, I started I did concurrent enrollment, meaning I was basically doing my high school classes through college, because a lot of one-on-one classes in college are basically high school level to a certain degree. So I was doing that when I was 16. So that's when I was starting to get college credit. By the time I was 18, I was pretty much already in my I was halfway through my junior year when I was 19. So, I mean, I was on track to graduate like pretty early. But I was at a point where I think part of that dynamic I just described of being like self-directed really just made me come to this sobering realization of like, okay, why am I actually here? Like, am I here? Because I was in college for business. I was like, I mean, with what I want to do, like, do I really need the, validation of a certificate? Do I really need the piece of paper? Do I really need like the time capital spent here? Like, is the ROI on my time really there? And the more I honestly, like, that question creeped into my head. And part of me, like, when I first started asking that question, I was like, part of it was like almost a sinking feeling. I was like, crap, this means I'm gonna have a hard decision coming up, because like, this is like, this thought is not leaving my head. And over time, I just meditated on it, prayed about it, talked to people about it, and I was just like, you know what, like, I'm just gonna cut the cord. I'm quitting, I'm dropping out. A lot of people didn't understand it. A lot of people were like, why are you doing this? Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, you've already made it. The biggest thing I heard, which made me very like cognizant and helpful in business, of the sunk cost fallacy of like, it's like, well, like, you're already like, you're halfway through your junior year. You only have like this long left. Like, why not finish it? Like, you're already so close. And like, to me, like, I had to rationalize, because I had to figure out how to articulate a lot of this too. That was also really helpful for me. And I was like, well, why let the fact that I've already wasted this much time make me waste more time, just because I have some emotional investment in it?
Sometimes you got to cut bait.
Exactly, and that's something I learned in business too. Like, a lot of times, when you're building something, there's stuff that you put a lot of your own investment into, and the natural human inclination is to get a return on your investments.
Yeah.
But like, sometimes if all the evidence is pointing to like, no, this is not what you should be doing, you got to fight that urge to like finish it, because you'll just be wasting your time and your resources. It's a sunk cost. So I learned that. I did that in college. And I mean, from there, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I was like, you know what, I've managed to like, and that's one of the things that like college for me was useful for, was like building connections. I would honestly say, if someone is like, this is the advice that I always give to younger, not that I'm like old, but like younger than me. When I talk, I'm talking to younger, when I'm talking to like the soon-to-be Gen Alpha people that are in college, I always say like, hey, if you're in business, you don't have to like quit like I did necessarily, but like, know what you're really there for. Like, especially if you're there for business, what the real benefit for you is the networking. Like, the business classes are cool, but everything you learn in a business class, I can almost guarantee, unless it's highly specialized like accounting or something, but pretty much anything you learn in a business class is going to be something that you learn in the field.
Or even accounting, you can, for sure.
Even accounting.
Like, I'm getting my CHFC right now, and I'm telling you, everything I'm learning is amazing. However, all a school is just organized information and how it's fed to you to learn it. You can literally go on YouTube. You can go to a bookstore. You can organize your own information, but that's all really a class is organized information to learn a specific subject, right?
Right.
So
no, exactly. So yeah, the big lesson I learned, and this is what I would share with anyone like who's like younger and in college there, it's like, the real benefit is the networking. So if you're there and you're able to like build relationships there, that can take you very far in your career. But like, make sure that if you're investing the time and the resources to be there, like, get the best return you can on that. And I was able to get somewhat of a return, enough that I was kind of able to, right from quitting school, like within a year, I was able to network my way into like tech sales, with no bachelor's degree, with no like formal, I mean, I did have an associate's, but I mean, what does that really count for in that world? So yeah, that was that. And that was kind of my academic career. And then as I kind of got into the professional world, I mean, I had my first like, that was another thing too that I thought was silly. Like, when I first got into like my first corporate job, I would talk to people about it and be like, oh wow, like, you have a grown-up job now, because before that I waited tables. And I'm like, you know what, like, to me that's also just a silly label in my opinion. Like, there's no such thing as like, work is work. Some of the most like successful entrepreneurs that I know, like, their day-to-day is sometimes some of the most tedious, seemingly undignified, from a matter of, from a perspective of some people, would be considered like undignified, tedious, boring work. man, like if there's something you want to do, and like it's if there's any kind of work that's on the path to your goal, like work is work. Like there's no there's no like big boy work. There's no grown up work. It's just,
Right.
work is just work, man. My parents were they were restaurant owners. When I was very little, they moved to Arizona from Wisconsin to do that, to start a restaurant business. And like, yeah, I mean, over time they became like, you know, more successful, and they had like a full-fledged staff and all that kind of thing. But you know what? Like they were the owners of the business, and sometimes my mom and dad, like they would wait tables, and they would like, my dad would hop in the kitchen and he would like be there cooking with the other line cooks. And to me, like if you're serious about actually being successful and not just the idea of being successful, then like work is just work, man. And that's something that's another thing I learned. Not to get off on a tangent. But
I think that's a good point, especially when you're starting a business. Like, so after this, I told you I'm going to do, you know, kind of just a talk on 5 things that are super important in the first 2 years of business. And one of those things, like for me, when I was starting out in a digital agency, I didn't have this grandiose thing. I'm going to have this digital agency. The reality was, I had left a job that paid really well for my age at that point in time. I didn't want to work there anymore, and I needed to figure out how to make money. And it just so happened that I had somebody who had an agency or was starting one, wanted me to help. I did all the sales because that's what I'm good at, and then he didn't want to pay me, and I'm like, well, that ain't gonna work. I got a wife and a new baby, and I'm like, well, he's not that smart. I can do anything that dude can do. That's very arrogant of me to say, but that is exactly what I thought.
Right.
And I'm like, cool, I'll just learn his part of the business. And I did. So I'm like, cool, I'm gonna learn how to use Photoshop and do graphic design. I'm gonna learn how to build, you know, websites. And WordPress was relatively new at this time, maybe, you know, 3 or 4. It was 2008. And I'm like, I'm just gonna learn all this stuff. So I learned all that stuff. And Facebook advertising was like brand new. Google AdWords was 4 years old. I'm like, so I got AdWords certified, and I learned everything. I knew how everything worked. And I wasn't great necessarily at any of it, but I dove in and I learned everything I possibly could. And then I'm like, oh, well, I can start an agency. People are going to pay to manage. I did Google AdWords for my old business that I had doing nutrition products that I sold all over the country. I did it for myself first. I'm like, oh, well, other people might pay for this. And sure enough, they would. And then, okay, now I can build these websites. And I started doing all that stuff. And eventually, I hired people to do all of these functions for me. But it's because I knew how everything worked. Didn't mean I was so good at it. Everybody that I hired was better than me at it, but I knew how it worked. I knew how it functioned. And because I spent that time, I could easily ask certain questions when I was interviewing people, and I would know whether they could do the job as well as me or better. And that was the prerequisite for me. If you can't do it better than me, there's no way I'm going to pay you to do this.
Right.
And you have to go through that time to be really good in what you do and to understand it. Like your job boards, when you started that, you had these 2 separate things that you knew there was a skilled thing. Well, you combined them. Nobody was going to come in and you were going to start outsourcing to somebody like one piece of that unless they could do it as good as you, right? But you wouldn't know that if you hadn't gone through it and really understood it. So I think that's a huge thing when it comes to business, is understanding what you do so well to where if you ever do then want to get to the scale, which again is one of my least favorite words in entrepreneurial, because it's like you got to have something to scale, something that's actually viable before you start trying to grow it and automate it and put all these things in place. But when you understand it super well and the market said, hey, we like what you're doing, now we can start to expand on it. Now we can put pieces in place. We can put someone to handle this function. We can automate a certain piece of this once we know how these pieces work. So it's it's just I think it's a mindset that you're always growing. So your new venture that you're doing, it's cool because I'm sure you'll learn 100 lessons in the next 6 months, a year, and it'll grow like crazy. But if somebody was interested in becoming a part of that, or who is your audience for it?
Sure. So, and this is kind of what's interesting about like having any kind of like social platform, having a personal brand, is like a lot of times you have an audience that you think you have, and then over time you're like, okay, well, certain people are resonating with this content more than people who I thought would be resonating with this content. That's interesting. So it has been like a learning period in that sense over time. But the initial like push for it and where it has mostly resonated was a big thing about me is that like this is something we were talking about a little bit earlier, is for me, like, I think a lot of people have like a certain way that they like to come across, or like a certain type of way that they want to be known by people around them. Like some people want to be like big in business. Some people want to be big in, they want to be like popular everywhere they go. Some people want to be the guy who's like well connected. Some want to be known as like their role in their family. And I think those are all awesome things. But for me, I think this has been kind of maybe revealed in some of my story, is I was always someone who wanted to be someone who could like transform themselves. Like that was me. I wanted to be someone who like, no matter what I wanted to do, if I saw a problem to be solved, like back to what you were saying about entrepreneurship, if there was like a problem I saw that I thought could be solved, I can do and be whatever I need to be within obviously within reason, right? Like I have my values, I have like things that make me Josh that like is never going to change, but like within that realm, like I can become and do anything I need to do, or become whoever I need to be in order to solve that problem, to make that happen. And I think that's something that a lot of people actually are looking to like find. It's like there are people who maybe they're not built necessarily for entrepreneurship. Maybe some of them are, but they have some kind of inner transformation that they know that they want to make, but they just don't have they haven't learned the right lessons yet to be able to make that shift, to like be able to or they haven't really realize how malleable they actually are in certain ways. Like they feel stuck, like they're locked into a certain like set of habits, or they're locked into a certain like lifestyle, or they're locked into this. And like what I wanted to do, as part of why it's called Legendary Life Media, was I was like, whatever legendary looks like to them, right? And it's kind of just like I thought it was it's a word that I've always liked, is legendary. But really what I wanted to do is have a platform for people who, regardless of what area of their life they might want to level up in, or what they want to make that shift in, whether it is business, or maybe it's their ability to travel, or it's their lifestyle, or maybe it's experiencing the kind of experiences that they've always wanted, right? I wanted to have a platform of creators, and a platform of just general kind of media, you could say, in a more technical sense, of like, this is what inspires people to and gives them the right lessons to live out these experiences and to make those inner transformations. And that's really my ultimate goal. It's like, that's the audience that I resonate with, is like, or that I hope resonates with our content, and has been resonating with our content, is people who see what we publish, and that inspires them. They're like, okay, and it's expanded in different areas too, right? So some of it is more like on the lifestyle experience side. We've had some great like partnerships with like music production companies, where like we're covering and kind of showing what the experience is of going to like these kind of having these like exclusive experiences in certain like music events, all the way through. Right? Yeah, we just had one. Yeah. We partner with a music production company out here in Arizona, and they were putting on a concert for it's a DJ group called Zed's Dead. They're pretty popular in the EDM space. But yeah, I mean, we get, one of the things that we do is like get free like VIP experiences for a lot of these shows. And what we're able to do is be like, hey, like this is what that lifestyle is like for someone who is able to make the right kind of inner transformations and growth that lead to making those experiences regular, right? We do that for those kind of experiences. We also do it for business as well. Like, we're a big part of like Arizona Entrepreneurs out here is one example.
Yeah. Shout
like
out to Devin Butler.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love you, Devin. But we're a big part of that, and other networking events. When it comes to travel, like we cover a lot of different travel experiences. We've done certain like partnerships with like hotels and resorts. So there's, and it's all from the lens, like, right, that's kind of in a way, kind of the traditional influencer model, but the way we're tackling it is like, okay, we're showing you a lifestyle, but we're really doing it for the purpose of showing you how to get the lifestyle. Like, what kind of inner transformations do you need to make in order to become the kind of person who inside and out is really like authentically living these experiences and is having a more fulfilling life internally that kind of leads to that as a natural outflowing result. Right. And whether it's any of those areas, right? And in terms of like people being part of it, it's really like, okay, who are people who have the, you know, the gumption and the drive to want to like kind of be part of showcasing that. And there's also from the business end, you know, the way that we make it a viable business is, you know, we're solving a problem here. Like, we're solving the problem of people who need to make these transformations or have identified that these are transformations that they would like to make to get to a certain point in life. And what we can do is basically provide them the inspiration, like let them know that it's possible, and then we can bridge that for them as well, right? We can say, hey, like, here are the actual like actionable steps that you can take, and you know, we have you know, products and packages around that too, right? So like that's the technical business side of it. But yeah, I mean, it's been growing to a really cool degree. It's something that I think is the future, like I said, and that's really why I wanted to dive so deeply into it, because the you know, the influencer, you know, the guru, you could say, model has kind of been in the zeitgeist for a little while, but I really wanted to take a unique approach to it, where instead of being like a one-off person who's trying to be that influencer, or is trying to be that creator, or trying to be that guru, what if we were able to actually build kind of an authority around it, like something that really vets the quality of these things, make sure that they're not kind of like dead-end type of, you know, there are a lot of great teachers and gurus out there. There's also a lot of teachers and gurus out there who are
it's like, you know, the coaching space. I mean,
exactly.
There's a lot of coaches out there that I've never built anything at
Right.
all, and like they're just regurgitating things that they've read in books, and that's fine if somebody wants to pay them and they're good enough to like sell themselves on that. However, there's something to being through the war of building businesses and understanding all the nuances of it that you really want to learn, or coaching in any space. You know,
Right.
we're talking about business specifically. So yeah, you're right. I mean, having certain vetting to where it's like, well, what have you done? Like, if you actually sold anything other than your coaching? Because if you haven't, then I mean, I can't do that. I can't like,
Right.
you know. So it's an amazing platform. I'm excited to get more involved with it as well. So yeah, no, this is fun. I'm glad we got a chance to talk. I know there's a lot of, you know, my audience that's younger that probably get bored of listening to me because he's 40, 40. I'll be 42 in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, you geezer.
Yeah, I'm a freaking geezer. You know? I've got gray coming in. So it's fun having someone that's young on and telling stories. But again, from a place of actually doing something. And I think I had expressed this with you. There's a lot of organizations out there that I just won't go around because, like, and it's not that I always value people. And so I have to say that I always value people. I love people. That's just like at my core being. However, I cannot stand unauthentic people trying to pretend that they're something that they're not, and that they haven't done anything, and trying to tell me stories about things that they haven't done anything, right? So I avoid those types of situations.
Right.
And you had asked me a question about, I think you asked me last week about like, why did you start your podcast? And I told you why I started it, but then really what it is now, I just want to have fun conversations.
Yeah.
I don't care if I ever get business out of this. I really don't. That's not the purpose of it. I get to have fun conversations, and I know if I'm interested in the conversation, there's a good chance that somebody who's listening to this is really interested in that as well. And if I have enough, people, enough, spaces to where we can have good conversations and talk about things that you and I didn't talk about what we were going to talk about today.
Right.
There was like maybe a couple of bullet points. I'm not even sure we covered those bullet points.
Honestly, yeah, I can tell you. I really couldn't tell you. And
Yeah.
I think that kind of goes back to one thing I will say is, we talked earlier about learning. I really genuinely believe that this is also a form of learning.
It absolutely is.
Because like one form of learning is what we talked about earlier, which is like acquiring knowledge, like, at Barnes and Noble, right? Something that I do, something that you used to do, like or maybe still do. Who knows? Might take a trip down memory lane. Who knows? But like, yes, like if you read a book written by someone great, like Richard Branson or something, like yes, you are getting the distilled like version of their best like lessons that they've learned in their life, and they can communicate that to you in like a logical way, right through their book. But like something that I really believe is that. And this can happen through books. This can happen through conversation. I think this can even happen through art. I think that's really what art is ultimately. Is not only can you share like information, but you can also share like the state of mind and the actual like internal place that they're at through that, right? I've had conversations with people like you, like successful people I really enjoy talking to, where we didn't necessarily talk about anything like. If you were to take a transcript of the conversation, like we weren't necessarily talking about anything business-wise. We weren't even necessarily talking about anything productive, so to speak. But I probably learned more about success from those conversations than I have from like informational business seminars I've been at, because there's something deeper than just information that I'm learning. Like there's something deeper than an informational lesson. Like there's something kind of being transferred. I don't want to get woo-woo with it, right? It's like it's an energy transfer, but it is something where there's inspiration happening. Like there's something where I'm like, okay, like I'm getting a feeling of what it's like to be in that state. And like if I read, you know, like Losing My Virginity by Richard Branson, or like Art of the Deal by Donald Trump, you know, regardless of how you feel about him, it's just like there's something about like reading what was put down by someone who had to have entered a certain state of mind to put down those words, and must have been in a certain state of mind and state of being, like when they were writing that. It's like you're almost accessing that state yourself by reading it. And to me, that's huge. Like,
and it is, right? So you're getting into their thought process, and that's kind of a macro learning type of situation. Because I told you, I went on this whole autobiography kick. I must have listened to 50 of them, and I can name off a bunch, but what we're talking about, conversations like this is what I consider micro-learning, right? This is, you know, we're having a conversation, and it's not necessarily that we're teaching each other things, but you're telling me about, here's something that I'm working on, here's something I'm going through, here's something I learned last week, whatever. We're talking about a book, we're talking about a situation, somebody that you had to talk to and have a hard conversation. Like I had a hard conversation with a guy who works here yesterday. It sucked. It was not fun, but you had to do it. You know, but if I shared that story and we're just talking about it, that's micro-learning, right? You got to understand my thought process. Now, doesn't mean my thought process was right, but you can hear like how I thought about that situation, all that stuff, and then vice versa. You tell me a story about, that's what conversations are all about. It's micro-learning, sharing what's going on in your life now, not necessarily the distilled, boiled down what's in a book later. You take all of these, you take the best of them, and then you put them in a book.
Right.
But there's something to be said about having a cup of coffee with somebody, grabbing lunch, having dinner, just going out and talking, even getting out there on a pickleball court and freaking slamming pickleballs, and then afterwards where you're breathing hard and you're just chatting about life. That is something I believe that's come back a ton, especially after COVID, that I'm excited to see. And it goes back to exactly what you're talking about, is like that is going to be really the personal brand, so to speak. I kind of boil it down to really just the likability and being around people again. That's what's important. A lot of the other stuff will be automated. It will be gone. There will be things that are commodities today that just, is just very transactional. But there's always going to be the personality, the human connection, that touch that's very important. And understanding that conversation is a portion of that, a big portion of that, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's also going to be, I feel like whenever we talk about AI these days, we're always doom and gloom. It's always like, what jobs is AI going to take? Like, what ways is AI going to take away the soul and stuff like that? But I think one of the, I think a positive that AI is actually going to bring that a lot of people aren't quite seeing yet is, once we genuinely reach a point, like we're not quite there yet, but once we reach the point where we're like, you know what, literally anything I see digitally could be fake. Like any video I see could be AI generated, any picture could be AI generated, any like social media profile could be AI generated. That's already happening to a large extent right now. But like look up the dead internet theory if you want to learn more about that. But I think what that's going to end up driving is a resurgence of like, you know what? One thing that can't be faked is this.
100%.
This could never be faked.
Right.
This could never be automated or generated by AI.
No.
Or computers or robots or whatever. Like, I think that's actually going to be sort of like the breaking point that we need, where it's like, you know what? I don't really want to chat with someone or connect with someone over social media because that ultimately, like, you never know what's real or not.
Right.
Like, let's sit down and have an actual cappuccino. let's actually sit down and talk. Like, let's have like an actual like face-to-face conversation that has like a real actual like energy exchange that cannot be, fabricated.
100%.
So I think that's actually going to be. It might take a little while, but I think that is going to be a downstream positive effect on society from all this automation that's happening. Yeah.
Now, if you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to it, this is AI. This is Josh and I are both avatars.
Everything you've seen so far is fake. None of this has been real, and this is just one step in our world domination plan.
Right.
So hopefully you've been thoroughly fooled. Yeah.
Totally a glitch in the matrix that you just witnessed right now.
Yep.
No, but this was a lot of fun, man. I appreciate you coming on today. Look up Josh. How can they find you?
Yeah, on Instagram you can find me at Legend of Josh, and my company is also just Legendary Life Media. No spaces or anything. That's our Instagram. Probably the best way to find us. Also, legendarylifemedia.com is where a lot of our content is going. And yeah, I always like to respond to DMs too. Hit me up, send me a message. Always happy to chat with whoever about pretty much anything. So
yeah, I mean, I would say if you're an entrepreneur of any age, really. And you're thinking about an idea, or maybe you've been in the space for a while and you're working on things, and you're like, okay, well, how did you kind of get to this next level of your business?
Yep.
Reach out to Josh. I mean, it's a young perspective, which is cool, because some of the old dogs in this world, it's been a long time since they've been through that, whereas he's just recently gone through that transition and is still in the battle, heat of the battle, you know. So anyway,
awesome.
I'm sure you guys got a lot out of this. I know I did. It was super fun catching up here in a more formalized. Most of the stuff we've ever done is back when I used to smoke cigars, it'd be cigars and having fun that way. But make sure you share this out with somebody that can utilize it. I appreciate you guys. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you next time.